I was staring at my coffee mug this morning, just, a standard ceramic mug, and I had this weird thought.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking, I own this, and it feels like such a solid, unshakable fact, like a block of reality.
Right.
But then I started reading the research for today's deep dive, and I realized ownership isn't a block at all. It's more like a bundle of invisible strings.
That is a much, much more accurate way to look at it. The legal system doesn't really see objects the way we do.
No.
It sees rights.
Exactly. Because think about it. When you rent an apartment, or when you let your neighbor cut across your driveway, or even when you get a birthday gift, what is actually happening? Legally?
You're not just moving atoms around.
Not at all. You're slicing and dicing rights, you're trading permissions, and you're dealing with all these liabilities you can't even see.
And that is precisely what we're unpacking today. We're looking at two foundational texts, the Transfer of Property Act 1882 and the Indian Easements Act 1882.
Which sounds incredibly dry and dusty.
It does.
But these two acts from the 19th century, they basically dictate how we live today.
They absolutely do. They form the architecture of ownership. And our mission here is to, strip away the jargon and figure out the mechanics.
Right.
We're going to look at leases, licenses, the hidden traps of gifts, and something that frankly confused me at first called actionable claims.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around that one. You can own a debt. Like, you can buy and sell the fact that someone owes you money.
You absolutely can. It's a huge part of the financial system, and we'll get into how that works. But we also need to clarify the massive difference between a tenant and just a guest.
Right.
Because if you get that wrong, you could wake up one morning and find your locks have been changed.
That's a terrifying thought. So let's jump right in. Let's start with the thing most of us have to deal with, the lease.
Chapter 17 of The Source.
We all think we know what renting is. I pay you money, I live in your house. But how does the law actually define that?
So, Section 105 gives us the formal definition, and this is critical. A lease is not a transfer of ownership.
Okay.
It is a transfer of the right to enjoy immovable property.
The right to enjoy. That sounds, a bit flowery. Is that just legal language for living there?
It's a very specific legal distinction. In a lease, you have a separation of two things: ownership and possession.
Right.
Ownership stays with the lessor, the landlord, but possession, that goes to the lessee, the tenant. And the courts have been very, very specific about what possession really means.
Yeah, I saw a case in the notes that really drilled down on this. Mahendra v. G.C. Murty.
Yes, Mahendra is a crucial one. The dispute there was essentially about control. The court had to figure out if the person occupying the space was a real tenant with rights or just someone managing the property. And the court observed that the transfer of a right to enjoy property to the exclusion of all others is the sine qua non of a lease.
Qui qua non.
It's Latin for without which not. It means it's the essential condition, the one thing you have to have.
So, exclusion of all others. Does that mean I can even lock out the landlord?
Generally speaking, yes. That's the litmus test. If the landlord keeps a key and can just wander in whenever they want to, check on things, you might not actually have a lease.
So do I have them?
You might have something else entirely. A lease implies that for that period of time, you are the king or queen of that castle, even against the actual owner.
Okay, so I'm the tenant. I have this bubble of exclusive enjoyment. But for how long? I always figured leases had to be temporary. But I saw something about leases being in perpetuity.
That was a surprise in the text, wasn't it? We usually think of a lease as, 11 months, maybe a few years. But according to the case Hamidullah v. Abdullah, a lease can be for a specific time or it can even be permanent.
A forever renter?
Theoretically, yes. As long as the parties agree to it, the law allows for it.
Wow. That sounds like a nightmare for a landlord. But speaking of the landlord, the lessor, what are they actually on the hook for? Besides, cashing the check.
Well, they have a really serious duty to disclose latent material defects.
Latent meaning hidden.
Correct. Things you can't just see by doing a walkthrough. If the foundation is crumbling or the wiring is dangerous, they must tell you.
And if they don't?
They're liable. And of course, they have a duty to actually give you possession of the place.
Right. You can't lease a place and then say, just kidding.
Exactly. On the flip side, the tenant has rights too, specifically quiet enjoyment. This was highlighted in Vinayak Rao v. Bondu.
Which brings us back to that exclusion thing. Quiet enjoyment doesn't mean the neighbors can't have a party, right?
No, it's not about noise. It means that as long as you're paying rent and following the rules, the landlord cannot interfere with your possession. They can't just barge in.
But, and this is where the tenant has to be careful, they also have duties. There's one in Section 108 I like to call the gold mine rule.
Ah, yes, the duty to inform.
Right. It says if the lessee discovers something that materially increases the value of the property, they are legally bound to tell the landlord, like finding a gold mine.
It sounds absurd, but imagine you're leasing a farm and you discover oil.
Okay.
You can't just keep that a secret, renew the lease at the cheap farm rate, and then start drilling. That's fraud. The property and its value ultimately belongs to the owner.
So I can't keep the gold. That's tragic.
I'm afraid not. Also, the tenant can't just erect permanent structures without permission. That was from Pundarikaksha v. Chunda Singh.
So no building a garage without asking.
Right. If you do, the landlord can make you tear it down.
So how does a lease actually end? I mean, time running out is the obvious one.
That's called efflux of time. But there's this fascinating concept called holding over, Section 116.
This is when the lease ends, but the tenant just stays.
They stay. But here's the trick. If the tenant stays and the landlord accepts rent from them,
Oh.
the lease is legally renewed.
So by taking the cash, the landlord is accidentally signing up for another round.
Precisely. It implies consent. If you're a landlord and you want a tenant out, do not cash that check after the lease expires.
Got it. Okay, now this brings us to what I think is the most confusing part for regular people. The difference between a lease and a license.
Worlds apart.
We use these words all the time. I'm leasing a hotel room. I have a license for this apartment. But legally, they are totally different beasts.
Completely. And this is where that exclusion concept we talked about becomes the deciding factor.
Yeah.
A license, defined in the Indian Easements Act, is just permission to do something on land that would otherwise be unlawful.
Unlawful.
Think about it. If you walk into my house without permission, that's trespassing.
Wow.
It's unlawful. If I say, come on in, I've given you a license, it makes the act lawful. But, and this is the key, it does not give you an interest in the property itself. It's a personal right.
So a lease attaches to the land, but a license attaches to the person.
Exactly. And that leads to major differences. First, transferability. If you have a lease, you can often sublet it.
Oh.
A license, no. If I invite you to my house, you can't send your cousin instead.
That makes sense. What about getting kicked out?
Revocability. A license can generally be revoked at will. I can ask you to leave my house at any moment, but I cannot revoke a lease just because I feel like it. You have a legal interest in that land.
Okay, so how do we know which one we have? Because I've seen contracts that try to be sneaky. They call it a license agreement to get around tenant protection laws.
Oh, landlords love to try that. That's why the Supreme Court in Associated Hotel of India, VRN Kapoor, laid down the law. They said the label on the document doesn't matter.
What matters is the intention.
Right. And how do you prove intention?
Exclusive possession.
You got it. In that hotel case, the issue was about a hotel room. Usually, a hotel guest is a licensee. Why? The hotel keeps a master key. They come in to clean.
The guest doesn't have exclusive possession.
Right. But if you rent a room and you have the only key and the landlord has to knock to get in, that's a lease, even if the paper says license.
That distinction probably saves a lot of people from getting evicted overnight.
It's a vital protection. It stops landlords from bypassing rent control laws just by changing the title of a document.
All right, let's pivot. We've talked about paying for space. Let's talk about getting space for free. Gifts?
A gift seems simple. A voluntary transfer without consideration. No money changes hands.
But there's a catch. The text mentions something really specific about acceptance.
Yes. A gift is not valid until it's accepted, and crucially, it must be accepted during the lifetime of the donor.
So if my rich uncle writes a deed giving me a house, puts it in his desk, and then passes away before I even know about it,
The gift is void. It fails, you get nothing.
that is wild. You have to say yes before the clock runs out.
Correct. But there's an even darker side to gifts. Section 127, the onerous gift.
That sounds like a trap.
It can be. Imagine I give you a gift of two things bundled together. One is a beautiful, profitable apartment building.
Aye.
The other is a swamp that has a massive tax debt attached to it.
Easy. I'll take the apartment and you can keep the swamp, thanks.
The law says you cannot do that.
Wait, why not? I didn't ask for the swamp.
It's based on a principle of equity. You can't cherry pick. If it's a single gift, you have to accept the whole thing, burden and benefit, or reject it all.
It's all or nothing.
The Latin maxim is qui sensit commodum debet et sentire onus. He who receives the advantage must also bear the burden.
So the law is basically saying, if you want the profit, You have to pay the tab.
Exactly. It prevents asset stripping. So if you ever get a mysterious inheritance, check the liabilities before you sign anything.
I will definitely keep that in mind. Okay, moving on from gifts. What if I want to trade property? That's an exchange, right?
Right. Chapter 18, it's basically barter. The key difference between an exchange and a sale is the price. In a sale, the price is money. In an exchange, the price is another piece of property.
And once the swap happens, it's treated like a sale.
Pretty much. The parties have the rights and liabilities of a seller for what they give and a buyer for what they get.
Okay, that's straightforward. But this next part,
Mm.
this is the one that really bit my brain. Actionable claims.
Chapter 20.
We're talking about owning a debt.
We are. An actionable claim is basically a claim to any debt other than one secured by a mortgage or a beneficial interest in movable property that's not in your possession.
Okay, let's ground this. Give me a real-world example.
The classic one is rent. Let's look at Didevi v. Chapaladevi. Imagine you're a landlord. Your tenant hasn't paid rent for 6 months. That arrears of rent, that money owed to you, is an asset you own. It's an actionable claim.
So I have a claim to that money.
Right. And you can actually transfer that claim to someone else.
So I can sell the right to collect that rent to a third party.
Exactly. This is how the debt collection industry works. If you owe money on a credit card, the bank holds that actionable claim. If you don't pay, they might sell it to a collection agency for cents on the dollar.
And the collection agency now owns the claim and can sue me for the full amount.
In a nutshell, yes. But Section 130 of the Act is very strict. The transfer must be in writing.
You can't just do it on a handshake.
No. It has to be a written instrument signed by the transferor.
It's fascinating. It turns a negative thing, a debt, into a tradable commodity.
Which is the foundation of a lot of modern finance.
Okay, we've covered leases, licenses, gifts, and claims. Now we're in the final section, the realm of invisible rights. Easements.
The Indian Easements Act, this deals with jura in re aliena, a right over someone else's property.
This is the neighbor walking across your lawn scenario.
It is. We have two key players here, the dominant heritage and the servient heritage.
Sounds like a power struggle.
It's just geography. The dominant heritage is the land that gets the benefit, your neighbor who needs the shortcut. The servient heritage is the land that bears the burden, your lawn.
And how do these rights happen? I assume you can just write it down.
You can, that's an easement by grant. But the law also creates them out of necessity.
Necessity.
Let's say I sell you a piece of land that is completely landlocked. It's in the middle of my farm, no public road to it.
So I own an island of dirt I can't get to.
Right. Legally, that ownership is useless. So the law implies an easement of necessity. You get a right-of-way across my land, whether I promised it or not. The case M. Christian v. M. Nanakutan confirms this.
That seems fair. But what about the one where someone just uses a path for so long it becomes theirs?
That's called prescription, Section 15. If you use a way, or light, or air.
Wait, light and air.
Yes, ancient lights. If you've had a window getting sunlight across your neighbor's empty lot for 20 years, peacefully and openly, you might get a prescriptive easement to that light.
So they can't suddenly build a wall that blocks it.
Not without a fight. 20 years is the magic number. Peacefully, openly, and this is the crucial part, as of right.
As of right? What does that mean?
It means you have to act as if you have the right without asking for permission.
Wait, walk me through that. If I ask my neighbor, hey, mind if I cut across your yard? And he says, sure. Does that count toward the 20 years?
No, that kills it immediately.
It does. Why?
If you ask for permission, you have a license. Remember, a license is just permission. A prescriptive easement is a hostile claim. You have to do it without permission, but openly enough that your neighbor could have stopped you but didn't.
That is so counterintuitive. So being polite actually prevents you from gaining the property right.
Ironically, yes, permission kills the easement. If you want to stop a neighbor from gaining an easement over your land, the best thing to do is give them written permission to use it.
That is legal hacking. I love it. So how does an easement die?
It can be extinguished. The most common way is unity of ownership.
If the person who needs the path buys the lawn.
Exactly. You can't have an easement over your own land, you just own it.
Makes sense.
Another way is non-enjoyment. If you stop using that path for a continuous period of 20 years, the right is extinguished. It's a use it or lose it situation.
And what about permanent alteration?
Yes. If the dominant property is permanently altered in a way that increases the burden, if you have a right to light for a small cottage and you knock it down to build a skyscraper, that specific right might be extinguished.
It really paints a picture of property, not as a static thing, but as this living relationship between people and places.
That's the perfect synthesis.
So bringing this all home, what does this really mean for us?
It means that ownership is fluid. We've seen you can own a house but have zero right to enter it because of a lease. You can have a friend stay over, but they have no legal claim to stay because it's just a
You
license.
can own a debt and sell it to a stranger.
And your neighbor might legally own a slice of usage over your backyard just because they've been walking there since the 90s.
It's a bit humbling. You realize your control over your castle is really a constant negotiation with the law.
Precisely. Every time you sign a rental agreement or let someone use your fence, you're engaging with these 19th century frameworks. They are the operating system of our modern life.
And that leads me to a final thought for everyone listening. I can't stop thinking about the onerous gift, the wet elephant.
It is a powerful concept.
We live in a world where we're obsessed with accumulating things, assets, inheritances, getting stuff. We tend to see that as purely positive. But legal history warns us. Sometimes the gift is a liability in disguise.
Mm,
It makes you wonder how many things in our lives, commitments, monthly subscriptions, even some relationships, are actually onerous gifts, where we accepted the benefit without realizing we were binding ourselves to the burden.
that is a question well worth asking. Would you check the strings attached before saying yes?
Something to mull over. Thanks for diving deep with us
That's
today.
been a pleasure.